Hello, everyone, and welcome to live event number 17. My name is Jeff Rolka. I want to welcome you to our weekly chat about mostly things vocal. Other things do come up from time to time, but it's mostly about singing, vocal instruction, questions that you might have, that sort of voice related, singing related, musician related thing. So, welcome. The chat is open. You can type in your question, whatever that may be, and I will take them in turn. I do have one question left over from this week that was emailed in, so I'm going to address that by way of getting started. But before I do, if you have chosen to subscribe, I thank you a lot. And if you haven't yet, I hope that you'll consider doing so now. So the question related to tongue and jaw movement during singing, during phonation. And FYI, I'll use phonation in the words. I'll use the words phonation and singing um, synonymously. They mean basically the same thing. So, with the jaw and the tongue, and hello, Susan Taylor. Good morning to you. Hot. Where are you? I'm not sure actually where you're located. It was a kind of a strange day here in England, neither hot nor cold. When the sun came out, it was nice, and there was enough clouds that it would cover over, and then it would get really cold. So I was like literally walking around, putting on a wool sweater and taking it off like all day long today. The jaw and tongue motion, the actual thinking around that has changed quite a bit in recent years. It used to be that we were always told to keep our mouths wide open. Open your mouth, let the sound come out. But as we've looked more and more at the soft tissues in the oral cavity, it is not necessarily advantageous to always have the jaw really, really prized open and really, really wide, particularly for oo and o vowels that require a lot of rear oral cavity resonance. By having the jaw really, really wide on those vowels, we can actually close it down quite a lot and limit the amount of resonance that they can achieve. One of the main things about it, though, one thing that has remained consistent over the years has been that it's important for the jaw to be loose so that if I'm singing an ascending phrase, we want to be able to allow it to open and close gradually. The idea is that if the TMJ joint is tense or the tongue root is tense, then it may or may not be in an advantageous position for whatever's coming next in the song that we happen to be singing. If it's loose, then those tissues will adapt far more quickly than you will be able to force them into position. So we want to keep them loose, released, relaxed. And if you have in the past practiced or had a singing instructor ask you to like do what I just did, where I opened and closed my jaw on the phrases, right? That's a good practice to get into just because it makes us aware of the tension that may or may not exist in the jaw. And as we open and close it, we're breaking up that tension. So you're learning to keep it more flexible. That way, when you're singing a song, it has the ability to go into the proper position for whatever word you're about to sing. Tacoma, Washington, USA. I have driven through Tacoma. I have not been and stayed in Tacoma, though I have a dear friend from Tacoma. Hot. I didn't think it got that hot in Tacoma, Washington, but I don't know. I don't really know all that much about it, I have to say. I've spent time in Seattle, in Portland, and parts in between, both touring and doing some short tours through the Pacific Northwest some years ago now. Not so much backpacking and hiking up there. I haven't really gone up there for that yet, but mostly through the Sierras for backpacking, hiking, and climbing. So yeah, everybody, drop your questions in. There were a couple questions that were worth bringing to the live event that came throughout the week. Trying to think. There was one very, very interesting question that I'll probably think of in a minute here. Hello, good to see you there, Gerald Ryan and JC's Radiant Ray. Welcome to the live event. I did not expect to see you pop up from India, but welcome, welcome. Hopefully, you're having a wonderful time there. Almost 80 degrees Fahrenheit at 10 a.m. That is hot. Good afternoon, Mazda. Welcome to the live event, and thank you all for popping in this afternoon, evening, morning, whatever it happens to be for where you are located. It's good to see you all. Nice, familiar names, even if not faces here. Caponi, hello. Olympic Games, same time, but I am here. Like runnings, but singing is fun. How tension-free is good for singing? Relax like Usain Bolt running. I don't know what Usain Bolt says about running. If you want to share some of what his advice is, I would be happy to read it out. Or, of course, people can read it off the chat as well. Most of the time, tension for singing, we want to have the right kind of tension, and I rarely use that word when I'm teaching because I just don't like the connotations around the word tension. You'll hear me say things like engagement or suspension or sometimes support, although that gets used in a lot of different ways, so I avoid the word support a lot of times too. I think when we talk about engagement or tension for singing, we want to put it in the right places, the places where it can positively affect our singing voice. So if we're holding a lot of tension in our trapezius muscles, that's not going to help us sing. Now, there's a certain school of thought around belting, where if you watch someone who has been belting for a very, very long time, they'll do this thing with their neck, where when they get ready to belt a pitch, I'll try to approximate it. It might be better if I turn sideways a little bit. You'll see their neck kind of sort of snap and lock back. So you get this kind of a thing, and they call it anchoring. I don't recommend it. I'm sorry to have to say. It's that amount of muscle tension in the back of the neck and at the back of the head. I have a hard time believing is advantageous in any way. So yeah, tension in the shoulders, the back of the neck, the trapezius muscles, that isn't going to help us achieve a better sound when we're singing. Engagement through the rib cage. Now, again, I'm not going to use the word tension. I really don't like that word when it comes to what we're doing, because everything that we're supposed to be doing is meant to be dynamic. It's meant to be engaged and responsive to the needs of the voice, flexible. So when we expand, it's still supple, and it's going to respond to the needs of the voice as we sing through the line. So we may find that we're reinforcing that engagement and keeping that lift happening, or we may be kind of floating easily through the phrase to top up again later on. But here, that kind of muscle engagement is quite beneficial. The rectus abdominis muscles, those at the front of the body, those are advantageous for us to use. We have to have engagement or tension there when we're singing. But again, it needs to be dynamic and responsive to the needs of the voice. The engagement that I might use here is different than I'm going to use there. Now, it's not as much more as one might think, but it is a little bit more. There's a little bit more insistence in the engagement when I'm moving towards my secondo passaggio, moving into my upper register. Tension in the jaw, in the tongue root, like I said a few moments ago, the soft tissues in the oral cavity, and the oral cavity is, like everywhere from the top of the esophagus up. So that includes your tongue, your mouth, the nasal pharynx, which is sort of the top back of the esophagus as it curves forward to the sinus passages, and the sinus passages as well. Those tissues, it's desirable to have them be flexible and able to respond to input when we're singing. We want them to be able to respond. I can't think of any other way that I would put that I think is more accurate. So, but then again, there is a little bit of lift here. There was another comment that came in about some of the videos where I'm squinting. It looks like I'm squinting sometimes. And it might be that I'm diving into the singing parts of the videos and not really being prepared to do so, because sometimes I'm talking very quickly in the videos, and I need to do a better job of being prepared to sing when I'm recording the videos. But when I'm getting to a certain point in my range, I'm lifting here to make sure that I have enough airflow to balance my sound, so I have an appropriate presentation. And that can sometimes look like squinting. That lifts the weight of my cheeks off of those sinus resonators and makes sure that there's availability of resonance there as I get into my mix range. But I'm not gonna grimace my face or do any of those things. I've practiced and worked that out. So there's a lot of engagement and muscle tension that we use from time to time when we're singing. It's just that we want to really use the appropriate tension and try to not do the things that are mostly distracting. You see someone singing an E vowel and they're smiling to sing E. I often think that those things happen for the best of intentions. The individual in question is trying really hard to focus their E vowel, but smiling that way, if anything, is going to draw it forward and it's going to draw it out of focus with the rest of the vowels. So it's in some ways a detriment to the vowel, but more than anything else, it's a distraction. That isn't as effective as focusing on the rear of the tongue and making sure that it's in the appropriate position to focus the E vowel. Susan Taylor, probably out hotter parts of the other world. Quite possibly so. That neck should be loose, no locking. I absolutely agree. Capone, I have I'm going to assume that means hard time relaxing for singing because I used to lift weights. Not anymore. Endurance running now. I use the force too much. Like the when you were lifting weights, like the powerlifting kind of force. I assume that's what you mean. I enjoy running myself, and I don't know if I that's what I do several days a week for relaxation and good exercise. Endurance running. I run several miles and some other exercises and things like that. Never really lifted weights, except for as a climber, we'll do antagonistic muscle exercises to make sure that things balance out. So like rotator cuff exercises and things like that. Susan Taylor, I'm probably getting a little personal here, but when a person is overweight, does that affect singing, breath control, etc.? I am losing weight. Yay. Well, that's great. Hard to say. Of course, the large opera singer is sort of an like an icon or a stereotype. I am of the opinion that the healthier we are in general, then the better we are situated to use our voices. Now, that's not to say that someone who's got a few extra pounds isn't healthy. Um, it really, I really think it's probably going to come down to on an individual level, how your body responds to whether one is got a few extra pounds or their, you know, life and a whatever appropriate BMI, whatever it is. So, because I've certainly known singers of all body types, and everyone varied in their own skills, just based upon where they were in their personal journey with singing, where they had come from, what they had learned in the past, and how well they took to making adjustments moving forward during the times that we worked together. What is quite common, however, is that when you have that opera singer who is perhaps a little bit got a little bit extra on board, there will be quite a lot of musculature underneath all of that. So the toning and the musculature that's used for phonation, it exists and it's there. It's just not necessarily as visibly evident as it might be on a person who doesn't have the extra weight on. So yeah, probably not a definitive answer by any stretch of the imagination, but I have known and worked with people of all body types, and it's more about, if anything, if there were going to be any way that it might be detrimental, it would be in generating body awareness. If that could somehow make one not as sympathetic to the way that musculature is working beneath the extra weight. But I can, even as I say that, I can think of examples of singers with whom I've worked who were a little bit overweight, and I know that they were sensing the musculature working beneath the weight because they verbally expressed that awareness in the lessons. Capone, I know good singers that sound like a horse when they breathe in. Is it bad control or what? It is annoying. I've never heard that expressed that way. I assume you mean the that kind of gasping breath. If that's not correct, if you're meaning a different kind of sound, then let me know. Mainly, when we take a breath and it's audible, like really, really audible. With a microphone right here in my face, if I take a breath and I do it as quietly as I can, you can still hear it. I mean, it's still quite there. It's a far cry from that. And in order to do that, pardon me, when I take that breath and I make it quite audible, that's a vocal fry, just hearing it on the inhale. It's the same thing. It's the same kind of vocal fold engagement as if I went not recommended to do that, by the way. So there's vocal fold engagement that may or may not set you up well for the next note that you have to sing in the song that you're working on. So you're basically kind of guessing at it. And I don't like to guess about things when I'm performing. There are elements of performance that are nice to have flexibility with, that there may be some improvisation that's worked into, but I don't want to guess with my technique. I don't want to guess with the note that I'm about to sing. That's, to me, not the right kind of guesswork. And even in improvisation, it's not guesswork when we improvise. We're coming at a plan, loosely organized though it may be. when we take that breath like that and we're engaging the vocal fold on the inhalation, then we may or may not be set up for the next tone that we're about to sing. That means we might get it, we might not. I want to remove those variables from my singing so that I know that when I take my breath, the next note that I'm intending to sing, it's going to be the right note. So the horse breath, not something that I would recommend. Some singers get away with it quite well, and I think that it makes less of a difference in the thyroarytenoid dominant range of our voices, the so-called chest voice, if you will. As we get into our upper registers or in the zona de passaggio, so-called mix range, it can be very detrimental to technique and maintaining appropriate release when we are meaning to go over the secondo passaggio or the break, if you will. It can be carrying too much vocal fold engagement to do it effectively. Maz, do you have any tips for working around blocked sinuses? I'm struggling with hay fever and have a recording session coming soon. I'm sorry to hear that. That's a drag. Steaming can be good. You've got to be like really disciplined with it. And depending on when your sessions are, if they're coming up like tomorrow, steaming's probably not going to have a detrimental effect on your ability to deliver in the studio, to sing, I should say. But I would hate to have you start this new regime and then find that it's disagreeable with your voice. If you've got a couple weeks before the sessions, then you might try steaming for a day or two and see how it works on your sinuses. You have to be very careful with steam. Obviously it's vaporized water, right? It's super hot. So be very, very cautious with that. If money were no object and you could have them, like speedily ship you something from Amazon or wherever, I would recommend getting like a bona fide steam machine that's gonna, funnel steam to you, because that way you know that you're gonna get it at a reasonable temperature and you're not gonna do any harm. So be very, very careful with steaming if you choose to go that route. But it will most help you with regular applications. So what you do is try a steam like a half an hour before you do your warm-ups or you start your practice session, and then see how long it lasts for you. You may have to then stop and do another steam an hour later, wait for 15 minutes and get back into the session or something like that. If it's really, really bad, you could get a prescription from your doctor. They would be able to advise you on that. I have known vocalists who've done that. I think oftentimes those medications cause drowsiness. I don't have hay fever, so I do not know what that's like. But that would be something if it's really, really bugging you. You could also try a neti pot, if you've ever heard of that. Again, you have to be very, very careful if you're using warm water with a neti pot. But literally, it's just a small little pot with like a little spigot on it, and you're pouring water up your nose to try to flush out the sinus cavities. Some people I've known have had a lot of success with that. I've tried it. I don't particularly like pouring water up my nose, and I don't have huge issues around my sinuses. I'm very fortunate in that. I don't struggle with allergies or hay fever or any of this stuff. So I've from time to time, usually when I'm dealing with a cold, I've tried these things. But yeah, that's what I've done in the past. Neti pot on occasion, steaming, which is really nice, but truth be told, I am disciplined in other ways, and steaming on a regular basis for me doesn't work very well. For me, what works best if I have anything going on with my nose or sinuses is just a very, very protracted warm-up. So if I have to sing at, I don't know, noon, I might start my warm up at 10 a.m. to make sure that I will truly, truly be ready, and I will consume a fairly good amount of room temperature water during that period, and I will continue to consume it throughout the period that I'm required to sing. I do hope that helps. Hi, can you sing covers? If you mean me specifically, yes, I can, and there are several, in fact, on YouTube. And I guess actually, I think I've released one or two covers on YouTube, but then there's quite a bit more on iTunes and Amazon. I did a whole cover EP of Beatles songs that I did some years ago now, and then the Atlantean doesn't have any covers on it, and Somewhere in the Fade has a U2 cover on it, and I've recorded a bunch of other covers, I just haven't released them. Now, if you mean can one sing covers, absolutely. I would ask what your question is around that. Susan Taylor, my choir director has mentioned in the past that the reason I have had trouble with breath control is because of my weight. My health has improved since then, and I am concentrating on my health. That's what I would say, and I would have some choice words for your choir director. Not that I'm sure they're awesome and stuff, but I don't think that's necessarily. I don't know. I don't know. I don't know the whole situation, but I think that is perhaps stepping outside the bounds there. It is generally accepted that we be of sort of kind of in a general BMI range. But there's so much conflicting information on this. I really, really, again, think it has to come down to the individual. And as far as I can tell, thinking about along the years of teaching that I have done, it has varied widely from individual to individual. And I've had people who were very, very thin who did not have great body awareness. So it's more about body awareness than anything else, and being aware of the musculature, trying to sense it internally, and trying some different exercises and things to generate that awareness. So, for example, like in some of the videos, I have my hands up over my head. That can help you feel what it's like to have the ribs expand. That can help you feel what happens when you do short notes. If you sing he, you can feel the solar plexus working to articulate those notes. And focusing in on that awareness is going to help your engagement, so-called breath control. Aldo, hello, welcome. I have two questions. Do you have any thoughts on how to move from falsetto to head voice to chest voice on certain words? 21 Pilots. I think I've heard of 21 Pilots. I don't know exactly what you're referencing there, but I'll tell you this. What you're talking about is flexibility and having an understanding of how the voice operates and the advantages and pitfalls. I'm going to go ahead and do this now. I forgot about it last week, but for those of you who are just joining in the chat, welcome to Live Event 17. I always forget to do these station identifications. Welcome to Live Event 17. If you've chosen to subscribe, thank you very much. And if you haven't yet, I hope that you'll consider doing so now. The chat is, I assuming you can see this on your screen, it is quite clearly open, and we've got lots of awesome questions and all kinds of cool things. So please dive in. Be not shy. All questions are welcome. Aldo, what you're talking about, when I read that, what I see is a question of flexibility. And certainly appropriate range as well. the most flexible for all those different things that you're talking about, chest voice, head voice, falsetto, that's going to be around middle C for me. So there, I'm going from my chest voice to my head voice, and I'm coming back down. But I'm flexible enough to do the top notes in falsetto and still get into my chest voice. I guess if I wanted to sing it all in falsetto, I could. I don't know if I could do it all in head voice because I really don't practice that. I'd have to start from the top down. That's not something I work on, the so-called countertenor technique. But you could practice that and work on it. Awareness of how the voice operates, flexibility to make it happen, is what's required to do that. And there's no reason why you can't do that. Susan Taylor, my breath control is getting better, but it still needs work on it. I think we all need to work on it. I need to work on it. If there's anything that I focus on when I'm vocalizing, and I vocalize just about every day. I miss a day or two here and there, but I try to vocalize at least once a day. And you will almost, if you could be a fly on the wall of the room while I was vocalizing, I've got my hands up here, I've got my hands over here. I'm being a bit of a marionette. I'm moving around. I'm checking in. I'm trying to make sure that I'm staying aware of the muscular engagement through the core of my body so that I know that I'm engaging properly. And I catch myself slacking off every once in a while like anybody else. It's just the way things go, and that's why we have all these tools at our disposal, all of these vocalizations, all this stuff that we talk about. They're tools to use to check in with how we're doing so that when we step on the stage, hopefully, we've practiced and developed good habits in our practice and performance practice and rehearsals, and that way we don't have to think about it on stage. It becomes our habit. Aldo, and the second question is, can you suggest any method for taking care of our voice? For example, Adele said that she boiled water and she breathed the air of it. Well, yeah, totally. Steaming, we just talked about that because someone was having sinus, I think that was Capone, if I remember correctly, was having sinus issues. And steaming can be very, very good for your voice. Like any of this stuff, like any of these things, try before you buy. In other words, don't start steaming the day before you got a big gig, right? Try your steam, try your vocalizations, see how it feels. If it feels okay, try it for a couple more days and see how it goes and see if things are still going well for you. If they are, carry on. If not, do something different. With steaming, you have to be careful. You really, really have to be careful because the steam, to be effective, needs to be pretty hot. I mean, steam is vaporized water, so it's boiling, 212 degrees as it's leaving the pot. You can burn yourself badly, so you must be careful. As I recommended earlier, if you could afford it, I would buy a steaming mechanism to try it out. And even those can be very, very, it's still boiling water. It's still steam. It's water vapor. And it's really, really hot. When I've owned those in the past, I have found that you have to work yourself up to a reasonable amount of time that you're going to use it. When I initially started using it, I could barely put my face into the thing. And then over time, I got accustomed to it. But you have to be very, very careful with steaming. You also have to be very regular with it, disciplined in your use of it. But yeah, try it out. Jeff, can you do more volume control exercises? Absolutely, Gerald Ryan. Let me make a note of it. Volume control let me just read that before it goes off screen. I assume you mean on YouTube. Volume control. JC's Radiant Ray, I like to experiment with my singing in practice. I started taking multiple short breaths instead of one long breath. Any thoughts of times? I don't know what you mean by any thoughts of times, but I like what you're talking about with the multiple short breaths. I talk about the rule that I often use in my lessons is the 80-20 rule. So we are going to fill our lungs to 80% capacity, sometimes maybe a little bit more, somewhere in that 80 to 90% realm, but not any more than that. And we're going to always hold 20% in reserve. So when we feel like we're getting down to 20%, then we need to take a breath. Now, the thing is that we have to look at the phrases in the songs that we're singing, or the exercises, if you will, here that we're doing or on YouTube, and say, like, okay, this is only going to use X amount of air. I'm going to start at 80% and I'm going to get down to 70%. So when I take my breath at the end of it, I only need 10%. I'm only going to just top up what I've expended on the exercise. And sometimes in the songs that we're singing, you'll have a short phrase, and then a very, very long phrase. And we ideally want to plan ahead for that long phrase. So before you sing all three of the phrases, you get to 80%. You sing your short phrase, grab your little top-up breath, sing your next short phrase, grab your little top-up breath. And here, you're going to start that longer phrase as if you haven't been singing at all. You're fully... you're fully, filled with air to 80%, and you're going to be just fine. There are times when it's nice artistically to run it out, to sing a longer phrase or a series of longer phrases where we might expend more of the overall amount of air that we're holding. But that has to be on a case-by-case basis, and we need to have adequate areas to get breaths. And realistically, when you've got really, really good engagement, anytime there's a hard consonant in any phrase, it's possible to grab a top-up breath so quickly and quietly that it's not going to be noticed by the average listener. So I'm a big, big fan and advocate the short breaths in the contexts of songs and exercises. Always, though, on a case-by-case basis, asking what the song requires of us. Capone, Alanis Morissette can sing backwards, inhale, and sing same time. Sounds weird, but as effect, okay. So how to practice dynamics for singing? Yeah, I can dig how she could maybe... I didn't like that. Vocalize as she's inhaling. And I can dig that as an effect every once in a while. Practicing dynamics for singing is the process of being sympathetic to the engagement around the abdominal area as it relates to our engagement with the diaphragm. So, keeping in mind, the diaphragm is largely being held passive in the process of phonation. We expand and it draws it down. The abdominal muscles engage with it, and the diaphragm resists that, and it stays in a lowered position, and this creates the suspension that is so-called apogeo. So when we ascend, in order for the voice to stay loose, it requires more airflow. As I ascend, I'm responding to that release. I'm providing more airflow. More airflow through the system creates more sympathetic vibrations. My voice gets louder. That's how I think about dynamics for singing. We can practice finding the lower boundaries. I don't spend a whole lot of time finding the upper boundaries, just because that often leads to shouting. And if we're using microphones, it's generally not necessary to be huge anyway. And besides that, we're much more likely to find volume in resonance than we will in force. So I think about dynamics in singing as finding the lower boundary. How softly can we sing while still having a full, engaged, in tune, well produced sound that aligns with all the vowels? That's a baseline for us. And as we ascend in our range, we want to maintain that release. The voice is going to quite naturally get louder and louder as we continue to ascend. And that's always been quite adequate. JAPADOGI, no worries. Join us anytime. It's good to see you. Maz Cinema, thanks. You are welcome, Maz. I'll try the steam, a long warm-up, and chamomile tea. That sounds lovely. That just sounds nice in general, quite frankly. I mean, a little steam, a little chamomile tea, perhaps even a little, like maybe just a small little bit of honey, perhaps, just to kind of give it a little bit of that feel good feel. A little squeeze of lemon, perhaps as well. That could be nice. Just a drop or two, really. Actually, I remembered. I've been asked several times, what do I drink? What do I recommend drinking? And I haven't been able to find an adequate formulation of it here in England. But I used to really, really enjoy, I think it's Traditional Medicinals echinacea tea with a small, super, super tiny amount of honey in that. That was my winter beverage in the Bay Area of California, just year after year after year, and that always kept me really, really going and never negatively impacted my ability to sing, as some black teas and some green teas did from time to time. Aldo, what's your video for arpeggio technique? And I realized that a strong, good arpeggio is like a 360 breath. So there is no 360 breath. Am I right? Well, so many vocal techniques and breathing techniques are repackaging of bel canto and arpeggio. I mean, the problem that I got into several weeks ago, someone asked me to evaluate 360 breathing, and so I did a couple quick searches, by no means comprehensive. So I had a couple quick looks, and my problem with it was that in the description, it was all about the musculature and thinking about breathing like really, really deeply. And when we teach arpeggio, we compartmentalize the musculature much more than what I got from, again, my very, very brief reading of it. We talk about expansion of the rib cage, and there's an awareness and a directed awareness about that. We want to feel the ribs themselves expand laterally. Generically saying we want the body to expand all the way around, I mean, sure, I suppose that's kind of true, but that's the 360 breath also talks about breathing very, very deeply in the front of the body, and the lungs just don't extend that far. I don't feel that that's an accurate description of the process. And furthermore, the abdominal muscles, the rectus abdominis muscles, are not meant to bow outwards on the inhalation. And that has been talked about and reinforced so much in singing, and arpeggio does not advocate that. It is not a part of the arpeggio technique to distend the stomach outwards. So that's my problem with 360 breathing. It's I feel that it is a repackaging of the arpeggio method, and that's totally cool. But that it's done in a way that is less specific than the actual motions of the bodies, and there's a few things about it that I find to be questionable. So, in general, but do I think that you are correct? Basically, I agree with you. I agree with what you're saying there. JAPADOJ, what makes voice powerful in higher register, and why it is so difficult to get? Why there is not such problem, or it is much less in chest voice? If we are dampening down the resonances in the upper register is much more dependent on soft tissue resonance for volume than the thyroarytenoid dominant range of our voice. So when I'm here, it matters a lot less if my soft palate is lower, if the nasal pharynx isn't expanded, if my tongue gets a little tense. It matters, but it doesn't matter quite as much. I gotta move this pad over. Is when I get here. If I tense up too much there, everything starts to come apart. I just barely made it onto that high note because I tensed so much of the tissues in my oral cavity as a demonstration. And I think that's the main thing, and that's why belting is such a tempting technique, because it basically says go for it. That's basically what belting is. It is often referred to in vocal pedagogy as entering the call of the voice, and the aperture of the oral cavity becomes that of a yell. And there's a quality to it that is kind of cool. And within a certain tessitura, as long as you don't exceed a certain range over your secondo passaggio, you'll probably be okay. But it's a one-trick pony. It's one way of achieving a certain number of high notes above your secondo passaggio. When you learn to make an adequate transition through the secondo passaggio, as I do, right, with entering head voice, then you get more range. However, you won't get the power if you don't learn to cultivate the release around it. You have to cultivate the release of those soft tissues. And I think that is often the problem with power in the upper register, that we've belted in the past, and I'm certainly was guilty of that for a long time. I've belted in the past, didn't get the results I wanted, learned that there was a different way, learned about what that was, and worked towards and continue to cultivate release of those tissues and smoothing through the transition of the secondo passaggio, so that I have a head voice that matches the resonance of the thyroarytenoid dominant voice. So head voice is cricothyroid, chest voice is thyroarytenoid. One last thought on that is that too frequently we are too heavy in the thyroarytenoid voice. So we're pushing on it so much that we're locked into it. And when we do get to that transition range of our voices, there's so much weight on it that it doesn't allow for the cricothyroid muscles to engage, and we don't have the range. We're too tense when we get there. That is sometimes referred to as throat lock. When that happens, you can't make a transition into your head voice. Gerald Ryan, it's hard for me to sing from loud. I'm assuming you mean loud to soft. Can I help with that? I can certainly do some exercises for it. Actually, there was an exercise at the end of one video. I threw it at the very, very end of one video. Off the top of my head, I don't remember what it is, but I can do some more of those. Those are fun. Very, very zen-like, if you ask me. JC's Radiant Race. To Susan Taylor, I'm going to let you guys read that. JAPDOJ. How to mount acoustic panels and not damage a wall. Oof, man. We always used glue, which is going to definitely damage the wall. Lots and lots of glue, because it's really annoying when they fall off. If your walls are made out of sheetrock or drywall, then I would just use pins. I would use really, really tiny pins and then spackle over it when you're done. And what you can do, pardon me, is you could play white noise in the room and see where things are reflecting, or play some music and see where frequencies are collecting, and then be very, very strategic with your acoustic foam or panels you have there. Because keeping in mind, acoustic panels are meant to break up standing waves, echoes, um, or break up collections of frequencies. So very frequently in a studio room at the back corners, bass frequencies will collect. So when you move around the room, you'll notice that all of a sudden you're flooded by bass frequency, and the panels or foam diffusers in those areas will break up those frequencies so that they don't collect and you have a more neutral sounding room. Panels aren't meant to soundproof, and I know I'm referencing our conversation from last week, but if that's what you're thinking, think again about the panels. Susan Taylor, I have raised my arms while practicing with your videos, so my ribcage is open. Your videos, so thank you. I'm glad that they are useful, and you are very, very welcome. That's awesome. JC's Radiant Ray. Jeff, are there times when shorter breaths might be preferred even when there is sufficient space for one fuller breath? Absolutely. I often recommend, and I often myself will take a shorter breath before a phrase that begins on a high note. So, let's say I'm singing something. Now I have a lot of time there within which to breathe if I want to. And I don't know if you could hear it or not, but I took my breath really, really quickly at the end of the exercise. And it gives me a little bit more time to just be engaged and be open. So I'm engaged, I have my airflow, my throat is open. I'm just doing a mental check-in on all of those things so that when I do get to the exercise, I know that I have a really, really high degree of opportunity of getting it right, basically. I would just want to always increase our opportunities to do it right. Yeah. So I'll do that in songs too. If I have a song and there's a higher part that's coming up, I'll take my breath quite a bit in advance in order to make sure that I have that space ready to go, that I'm ready in as many ways as I can think of. I won't necessarily be consciously thinking about that. That will be something I'll plan into my practice and practice and practice and practice so that when I do go off to sing the song, then, it just happens, right? But I've been practicing it all along. Thank you, Susan. I really appreciate that. Capone, no, Capone has mucus problems, not sinus. After warm up, my throat clears out. Okay, that's good. Oh, thank you. I see you're after the warm ups that I've done here, and that's really cool. Thank you very much. Matt Cinema, that's a great suggestion about volume control. I've been doing Messa di Voce. Yeah, that was one of those. I put one of those drills at the end of a video. I just can't remember which one it was. They are really, really good. They're very, very good. And I'll do some of those. I'm going to do, based upon Gerald Ryan's request, I'll do a couple of videos in the next couple of weeks. One doing the sort of standard volume change technique where we do the ascending phrase and get a little bit louder and then kind of get softer again. And then I'll do some of those Messa di Voce exercises where you're doing the sustained pitch and doing the slow volume increase and then decrease. Those are just lovely exercises. They're lovely. That sound good? Let me know if that sounds good. Gerald Ryan's saying hi to Susan Taylor. Susan Taylor is saying back. Yeah, that's right, because Susan was helping me get the questions sorted out there. That was right. That was really cool. I really enjoyed all the interplay. It makes me very happy to see everyone talking amongst yourselves in the chat. That's a good feeling. It's a good thing. JAPADOGI. You're very, very welcome. Thanks for coming in and taking a little time off from the Olympic Games. Do enjoy yourself. Have a good time. Yeah, I haven't actually watched any of it. I've kept up a little bit in the news, but it sounds like I guess everything is okay. The aquatic events in the bay sound a little bit not terribly hygienic, but you know. Capone's watching javelin because we Finns are the best in that. I did not know that. I did not know that at all. That is good to hear. There was a very heartwarming story about a gentleman who was an Uber driver, I think in Boston. And I think he'd picked someone up and was talking about how his son was in the Olympics doing shot put. And the gentleman driving the Uber could not go. He couldn't afford to go. And the woman to whom he was giving the ride organized a GoFundMe for him. And, you know, it was cool. They got him sent down to Rio so he could watch his son throw the shot put. That's pretty cool. Susan Taylor, ladies gymnastics is my favorite in the Olympics. Gymnastics is pretty awesome. I have often been a fan of the floor exercises. I think the floor exercises are really, really cool. I heard about that poor guy who broke his leg. I don't know if that was the actual photo, but it was like his leg was pointing this way and the other part was pointing that way, and it was just like, oh man, not good. Though I heard that he was already walking again. So that's fantastic. Maz Sitama, you are welcome, Maz. And yes, good luck with your recording session. I hope that all goes well for you. And let me know once you've done the recordings, like send me a link. I'd love to check it out. I'm always interested to hear what all you folks are doing, recording wise, live wise, that sort of stuff. Yes, Susan Taylor, the French gymnast on the vault, awful, just awful. Ugh. But hopefully he'll make a recovery. I would assume he'd make I don't know. Just awful. But yeah, we're almost out of time. So if anybody's got any last minute questions, requests, or otherwise, get them in, because I will go right up to 7 p.m., but it has been another fantastic, fantastic session. They are just getting more and more fun as we all get to know the way it all works here on the live events and sharing the information. I'm not gonna bother worry about trying to figure out, because those mezza de voce exercises were just at the very, very end of that one video. I'll do another video and incorporate more of that into the practice. Yes, Capone, the weightlifter driver. That's right. He dislocated his arm. Well, actually, I don't know. You're saying there was a broken arm, unless I'm thinking of a different injury. But I saw the one dislocation. It was just awful. Much better to sing, I think. I like singing. I haven't dislocated anything or broken anything while singing. Though I suppose if you were a punk rock singer and were stage diving and doing all that kind of stuff, that could end in an injury, but hopefully not. In any case, it looks like things are winding down here. No, there isn't an Olympics for singing, so I'm going to wish you all a very, very fond farewell. Thank you so much for joining me this evening. Thank you for the wonderful questions. Thank you for all the interactions and just participating. It really means a lot to me, and it's great to hear from you all. Have a wonderful, wonderful week. Take really good care of your voices. Enjoy singing. I will see you all next week. Bye-bye.